Hi, everybody. Rebecca Nelson, Wine Club Director here at Becker Vineyards, back with you once again. We just did the math, and this is our 35th virtual tasting now that you're joining us for. We're really, really excited to have everybody with us once again. Tonight, we are trying the 2016 Autunno, which is a fantastic Bordeaux blend. This is from the Lacaccio Stagioni series, and is traditionally a Wine Club member only wine. So we're really excited that everybody's going to get to try this and hear about this great wine that you may not normally have been able to sample when you've been out to the winery. Tonight we have, of course, our winemaker, John Leahy, with us again. We have our assistant winemaker and enologist, Rachel Fanning, and we have our general manager, Bret. And they're going to take you through this fantastic wine from start to finish. And I'm sure there's going to be some talk about food as well, since it is Food Friday. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. And I hope that you all enjoy and have a fabulous, fabulous weekend. Cheers.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. You're going to have to let me know if I'm coming in shady or not, because I'm actually doing this remote from an extraordinarily isolated campsite where I'm enjoying the views of a lake that's getting ready to be a torrential rainstorm. So I can pick the weekends. So Rachel and Bret are here. Before we get started, right off the bat, I want everybody to give their wine a swirl, a sniff, and a taste. And then, Rachel, we need to talk about this wine because it's extraordinarily important.
It is, isn't it? It's kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. Oh, man. So I don't have my decanter tonight. So I have what I call my camp out decanter. It's a little aerator that goes right in the top of the wine bottle, and it swirls the wine as you pour it out. Does a nice job, add a little bit of oxygen, especially as something that's been closed up for a few years. So take us through this wine, because I believe it's what, 86% Becker and 11% Talent.
Sounds about right.
Yep.
Yep. That's good math. Nope. That's a little low math.
Oh, sorry. 88, 89.
Yeah.
Yeah. 89. Yeah. It's bad math any way you look at it. Okay, so give us your impressions, and then we're going to go into the blend, because I'm very excited about this blend. It really is a classic Bordeaux blend. So Bret, I'm going to have you lead off on your impressions, and then Rachel, and then Rachel, you and I are going to get into this blend and why it worked out the way it did.
Well, and I might, if you could let me go first, I might burst some of your bubble, but
no, go right ahead.
Or steal some of your thunder. But as we've talked about before, we kind of make wines. We make the wine first, and then we name it. And I forgot that we called this forever in our world, in the production side, the Becker Bordeaux blend, until Rachel reminded me today. And I went and grabbed a bottle of it, and I was like, man, this is crazy good. What is this? And I kind of forgot about it. And so she's like, that was the Becker Bordeaux, and obviously we can't use that on our. Is that the first one? We can't use that on the label. You can't say Bordeaux, and I was like, man, this is so good. And she said that was what we used to call the Becker Bordeaux, and I was like, well, obviously that was, that's why I was so excited about this one. And at about 4 o'clock, I thought, man, this has a bigger story than what I remembered. And then we put this agenda together and started looking at the background of these grapes. So I'm going to defer to you guys to talk about the wine. I just tried it. I thought it was crazy good. You guys talk about the wine, and I'm going to talk about the blocks individually after you guys get done.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. Absolutely excellent. So, Rachel, what's your impression of the wine after giving it the first taste?
And again, beautiful nose. There's some flying at me. It's got, to me, this is a really nice, very dry, very subtle, and there's another word in here, and I'll come up with it for in a second. But it's a very nice, very easy Bordeaux blend. I don't know. I'm a little bit stumped. I'll get back to this one in a second. Sorry, I'm so unprepared. I know this, right?
No,
you said this is
you're fine.
And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm doing.
No, it's perfect. See, but this is the beautiful thing about wine. You don't need great adjectives. You don't need flowery descriptions. We don't need to know that it's like week old sweaty saddle leather or anything like that, which is something I actually read in a famous wine publication and about died laughing when I read it. Not about ours, but about Cabernet. But so the cab, okay, so I'm going to take us through the blend, and then I will give you what I get out of this. So this is the third time in the last maybe year and a half that I've had this wine. And it was because, Rachel, when you mentioned this, it was a little over a year ago. It's like, have you tasted the 16 Autunno? And I was like, no, I haven't tasted it forever. I tasted it, was doing well. Then we came back to it again right after harvest. And then then this is the third time. So our blend here is 40% from the Becker Vineyard. I'll give the vineyard by vineyard, and then I'll give you the overall blend. So it's 40% Becker Cab, 40% Becker Merlot, and 9% Becker Malbec. Then on the Talent side, the Drew Talent Vineyard up in Mason County, it's 6% of his Merlot, 6% Merlot from his property, and 5% Petit Verdot. So that makes the overall blend 46% Merlot, 40% Cab, 9% Malbec, and 5% Petit Verdot. Really borderline nice Pomerol area. It's got that really nice mellow velvet from the Merlot, which is something I absolutely love about Texas Merlot. It's got this really round and well-developed mouthfeel to it. So Bret, take through the blocks in our vineyard, and then we want to talk about Drew's too. And Drew was on here last week, or a little over a week ago, but take us through our blocks on the Cab, Merlot, and then Malbec.
Yeah, so we've got at the Stonewall Vineyard, and I put this on there because I think that a lot of people that have followed us for a while know that we've got obviously the estate vineyard, but we had two vineyards in other places. One was Ballinger and one was Mason, Texas, and we sold those many years back. And I think that when we did that, I was always pushing to have stuff at home that we could take care of and not have a 2.5 hour drive to go look at the vineyard or an hour drive to Mason. And so we finally decided to do that. And I think that the overall focus from the Beckers was to, center back to home, so to speak, take care of, things at the house. And we were kind of reinvigorating this vineyard with the help of Cole Harper, who was with us for many years, that left, and now he's consulting and doing a lot of other things. And now we've got a new vineyard manager, but the idea is to take care of the stuff that's close to where we see. And obviously, and a lot of this, I can tell you that in my opinion, we planted Malbec specifically because of the great success that Drew Talent was having with Malbec in Mason County. And I basically was a carbon copy of what he was doing on the same rootstock. And my goal was to make Malbec that was good enough to go into the Raven at that time, in the back vineyard. And so that's what we did. But anyway, the Cabernet that's specific in this block is a split, I think, between the young and the old. I don't know what we have two different blocks there. One was planted in 1992. The other one was about 2001. The younger vineyard is on the, it's a lot easier to kind of get the grapes at the ripening stage on that younger block. And the older one is just kind of chugging along, but I think eventually we're going to replace that block with kind of the new version of this. And again, when we talk about this, I don't want to get too geeky about, rootstocks and all that kind of stuff. But in my opinion, and this is just what I think that most of the vineyard at Stonewall was planted on the wrong rootstock in 1992 and 93 when they planted it. It was on 5BB. And when we did a rootstock trial for Texas A&M a few years ago, we just walked through there. It wasn't like I just visually walked through and look at stuff. And that particular one, on most every single type of grape that it was planted on, it was probably in the average category as far as what the vine was doing. There was another one that just shined, and that's what we planted the rest of the new stuff on. And I think that that's what we're seeing as this goes forward. And I do think that these blocks that we have on the estate vineyard are going to start to like really reap the benefits of that in 5 to 10 years.
To interrupt you, was that the Paulson that?
Yeah. So I have a hard, John, I try not to quote too many things, because what happens is one person says plant everything on 1103P.
Yeah. Right.
And then everybody goes and does it. And the bottom line is that this was an observation that I made on our particular vineyard in our land.
Well, and everybody's got to, you know what, though, everybody's got to do that for themselves, because, even 2 miles apart, and we've seen this time and time again, it's wholly different situation.
Yeah.
So,
and again, yeah.
You might want to explain to all the people who are watching that don't know all of our geekiness and our rootstock talk, what you're talking about.
Can you guys
Joe,
hear me?
is that you?
I did.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that, Bret, you are now being officially added to the story of when Mom and I planted the grapes. And Dad showed up and said that weren't doing it wrong. And 20 years later, you come along and you tell us that we're putting it on the wrong rootstock.
That's not where I thought you were going with that story.
It's Joe, the voice from the ethers.
Is my camera still not on?
Yeah, I can't even see him on my screen, but
all right, I'm going to log out and log back in.
Okay. So one of the things that I think what Joe is referring to is
he's good, yeah.
John,
y'all got it? Okay. What was crazy when they and Joe, I think when they bought the first planting in 1992 for that back Cabernet, which this has got part of, there was a little bit of a clonal trial. And again, Rachel said to explain this a little bit, but you got to realize that, you know, you take a grape that's a Cabernet and it can grow in 100 different, you know, roots in the ground, but it produces Cabernet at the top. And then on the top of that, you have different clones of Cabernet that are a little bit different. And that's where we start getting geeked out that if, you know, we talk about this too much, everybody glazes over. But the Beckers actually had a mini trial going on in the back that I don't know that it was on purpose or not, but there was 5 or 6 different clones in that original Cabernet block that is going through the records about, like, and I don't know if, you know, if that was just what was available and they got it, or that was pointed and very specific. I would think that it was probably pointed and specific, but the other funny thing that happened in that vineyard is you drive through there and every once in a while you run into like 10 vines of white grape. And I'm like, well, was that when Dr. Becker pulled up and started, you know, pointing out what people should be doing and they grabbed the wrong bucket and they put Viognier in there on accident, you know? So.
Jeez. Well, but that's a cab, but back to that Merlot, because, you know, there are times we've struggled with it. I know 14 right after 13 problems, we'd struggled with a canopy. We've had good canopy and then struggled canopy with this, but the Merlot, that Merlot block, especially the older Merlot is kind of one of my favorites, even though it's not producing as much right now. Now the older Merlot block, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that the one that he and Bunny planted originally in 92? Is he back on? Okay.
Well,
yeah. So do you know, Bret, is that?
Yeah, the original block that they planted, we pulled out.
Okay.
And it was next to the Cab Franc, and so the Merlot that you're talking about was planted about 2001 or 2002.
Okay.
And
all right.
And it made this incredible, I mean, that Merlot in my mind is, and again, we go back to like places that we, you know, Granite Hill Vineyard with, you know, Steve and Bill Blackman that were there, that block of Merlot that I remember they very specifically went after, like low production, low yield. And I think that's what you're tasting in this is that Merlot and in our vineyard in Stonewall, that Merlot will not make 4 tons an acre. It struggles to make 2, but when it makes 2, it makes really good Merlot.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we made so the Malbec, which I find really interesting, and Rachel, I want you to give a little input on here. Have you found any difference between the Malbec in our back vineyard and the front vineyard? If so, what? If not, why? Ask a loaded question up front.
No, that's good. So in talking about our back and front vineyard, those Malbecs were all planted at different times. And Bret, you'll have to help me out with that. 2004 is the oldest one that I remember off the top of my head. And again, you know, we have 2004, we have 2005, we have and then we planted a whole bunch more just this last year. So we've got another several, I don't know, 3 or 4 acres that we just planted again. And it does produce.
Remember we call them older, and oldest, and you get mad about that?
No.
That doesn't even exist anymore. Yeah, so our nomenclature is not up for grabs anymore.
It's joined the 21st century with real block numbers.
Right. Yeah, for the Malbec, it does produce really, really nicely. And it is quite a bit different. Bret, you were alluding to the fact that Merlot is not going to produce 4 tons to an acre. If it ever
No.
did, I didn't know that it ever got that large. But I feel like with the vines and that old cap that's in the back as well, those vines are so old that they are down self-regulating. They're, you know, like they're just cruising. They're cruising to where they are right now and may get like 2 or 3 tons to the acre on a really fabulous year. Let's hope for a fabulous year this year for us.
Yeah, really, right?
One of the things
So-
that I'd like to point out, we've tasted a whole lot of High Plains cabs, you know, over the last several weeks. And so you were talking about this wine is kind of a big deal. It's a big deal for us because this, to me, is proof in the bottle that the Hill Country produces a lovely Bordeaux style wine.
Oh, it does. You know, what this, I want to make mention, and I'll be off my soapbox in a second, but this is, to me, is proof that, you know, I read an article in 2012 when I first started working at Becker saying how Bordeaux varietals were the wrong choice for Texas. And without mentioning names of who wrote the article, we sent him a bottle of this wine right after we released it. So,
Hey, so I would like Joe, like we were trying to come up with the question about the Quattro Stagioni label that this falls under. Joe,
Yes.
do you remember exactly what your parents' thoughts were about when this all started?
I have some recollection of this.
Okay.
You know, I think that my parents were, you know, a little bit, I think early on, there was some inspiration from making, you know, a form of a super Tuscan, you know, some sort of Italian varietal, probably Barbera, or, but blended with a Bordeaux, a Merlot, or a Cab. And then I think over time it progressed into, you know, different expressions of Merlot from different Texas vineyards, from different years, small lots, kind of, excuse me, kind of similar to the program that we have with our single vineyard Cabernets. And so I think that this evolved into kind of looking at different expressions of Merlot.
yeah, we did that in, you know, when, and Rachel, you'll remember this because we were digging around frantically because of those 4 vineyards in 2012 that we had 4 different Merlots. And in 13, 14, we were looking, and that's when we dug through Bret's file on all the old labels. So we ransacked his office, which is what good coworkers do.
I don't know why you're dragging me down under the bus. It clearly was just him.
Yeah, whatever. You're standing there going, I think it's in the other drawer. No. But no, we did. We found those La Quattro Stagioni labels in there, just beautiful pieces of artwork. You know, and I love, there are several of the Tony Bell paintings that are very geologic on there. And I really like the one that's here with that bare tree and then the rock underneath it. But it just harkens back to the fact that it is about the soil and the underlying geology that makes wines so unique in each region. And it did evolve into the Merlots because we had 4 Merlot vineyards we really wanted to highlight in the 2012, and now we've got 4 labels that we can use any given year for really special wines. And I would like to think that this capitalizes on that by showing 100% Texas Hill Country Bordeaux, that what can be done with it. So Joe, we went through a little earlier, and I would like your impressions of the wine now, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure.
I know, right? Pause for the sip.
I think that this wine has a little bit of it has a very nice mouthfeel. It has a little bit of cassis in it.
Yes.
I think it's you know, very, very rich from front to back. And as I learned my lesson, I decanted mine for about an hour and a half, and it's right now. It is just what's in my glass is in a wonderful place. And you know, the expression of the Merlot in this wine is powerful. I love Merlot, so I'm getting a lot from this wine.
Well, so it's interesting to me the way Merlot, you know, will accentuate Cabernet in small enough quantity, and you flip that, and the Cab will accentuate Merlot. They're very symbiotic in that response.
And John, did you say there's a small percentage of Malbec in this?
Yes, there is. So I'll run through it again quick. And I apologize for those of you who are asking questions if I'm not seeing them. I am actually unable to see questions on Facebook Live right now. So we will get to your questions. Bret's going to start feeding us some questions from there. But the overall blend, Joe, is 46% Merlot, 40% Cab, 9% Malbec, and 5% Petit Verdot. And then it's 89% Becker and 11% Talent Vineyard.
And that Petit Verdot is, I baked this, makes this really enriches this wine, makes it very dark, very lovely. I love the color on it. It's amazing that the effect that Petit Verdot has in our part of the world.
It is, and Drew Talent's Petit Verdot especially, he's got some just incredibly rich fruit with the PV from his vineyard up there. So,
well, and do you remember though that when we tried this, we called it the Becker Bordeaux forever, and then we sat down in our blind tasting and we loved it the way it was, just out of our vineyards. And I remember that the comment was it needs just something else. And so,
right.
Again, I tell this story all the time to people. Is like we don't like go pointed at trying to make an estate bottle of wine if we don't think it's complete by itself. And it really did need the 5% of that Petit Verdot from Talent, and it really did need the 6% of the Merlot from Talent. And I think that that's a testament to like that blind tasting schedule that we do every weekend. That it's not some hoity-toity thing. We're trying to make the best wine we can. If it needs something else, we're going to go after it. So.
Well, and at the end of the day, it's Rachel's and my job to make sure that each lot is treated as if it were the king of the hill, and give the best that we can for each thing according to its needs, according to its state when it arrives at the vineyard. And we do a lot of times, we do spend a lot of time going through those vineyards, the three of us, either individually or together. There's a lot of, and I think Bret spends a lot more time sometimes dealing. I know in 16 and 17 both, you spend an inordinately large amount of time out in the different vineyards, back and forth. And we, at the end of the day, the art of winemaking is the art of blending, I think. When you're able to give a non-prejudicial view on each lot. And, that's why Rachel and I taste quite a bit. And then we go through and say, what would it be like here or here? We present, and then we get the feedback on Saturday. When you and I and Doc and Joe sit down, Bret, we give that feedback. And that's extraordinarily important, because you do want to make a wine that everybody's going to enjoy at the end of the day, but you also want to put your best foot forward at the same time.
But
so,
I think
I do have a question.
a tribute to John and Rachel is, John, how you present the blends to us, and that blind tasting that we do on Saturday, we'll do maybe at most, I would say 3 different wines, 2 or 3 different samples, and it's, the idea of as goofy as it sounds, of palate fatigue is real, and
oh yes, it is.
And when you taste a wine, when you're trying to get a wine like this just right, with the Merlot, with the Petit Verdot, I think you guys do a really nice job of presenting that and really trying. One thing, John, that's you and Rachel do really well is trying to get the varietal expression across.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're gonna if you're just going to drink a red wine that tastes generic, then you might as well just put it in a black and white label.
Well,
hey, by the way, that was funny.
No, it's not.
Some black and white labels are really cool.
What? Yeah, what kind of wine?
I do have a segue into this, and it's a question that came across that they just handed me. So we've had so many wines! ! How many are under the Becker label total? And I do think that this is something that we kind of all joke about. And if you asked me the question and I had to give you the right answer, I'd probably miss it. There's a lot. And the reason why there's a lot is because of what we just talked about, and the fact that there's probably 40 different SKUs that we make. And the reason for that is because it's so fun when you have Merlots that present themselves in a certain way, or Cabernets or Sangioveses or whatever. And historically, what
I thought we were talking about wine.
Yeah, no. But historically what's happened is that if something presents itself out of our cellar, then we make it. And that's
Yep.
and I'm working on 2 brand new labels right now that I would have never thought we were doing, but that's just how it shook out. And you know, if you go back to 10 years ago, I was the one in the meetings arguing like, we got too many wines. And then about 5 years after that, it's like, let's open the gates and just let's make this cool. So Joe kind of explained how that works.
It's funny you say that, Bret, because when we first started, I can remember as a kid, my dad and my uncle and my brother a little bit, they always loved the early Kiesler Chardonnay. My dad had I think bought a large collection from the wine store that's not open anymore in Austin. And he always, I think, loved Burgundies. And so and Burgundy is complicated because it's the planting is in the region and the rows are owned by different producers. But the idea is that you're trying to find the very best grape for that particular region. And so the idea was that we could find the very best grape, and that we would be, as crazy as it sounds, a Viognier house or maybe a Tempranillo house. We wanted to find the best grape that grew in our area and grow that and make that into a wine. And it's incredible that over time we've gone from that idea to the fact that you can grow these just so many different incredible varietals in Texas. The Southern Rhones, the Cabernets, the Bordeaux's, Cabernets of Bordeaux, but the Tempranillo. And so and we have a great team that's been able to kind of put that together. So it's interesting how that's evolved from trying to find the right grape to finding that many grapes and many wines do really well in Texas.
So the next question, John, the next question that popped up it's twofold. It's for Rachel and for John. Okay, so Rachel, what if you could make any wine? What would you make?
Oh, Viognier.
The same. Yeah.
So is that too quick? Viognier. Like, I love it. It's absolutely, it's my favorite. Mm-hmm.
My mom's favorite wine too, Rachel.
Right.
We had very similar palates.
Yes.
Yes, exactly the same, actually. They were very similar.
Yeah, they are.
All right, John, what's your favorite wine to make?
Yes.
Just, you have to pick one.
To be quite frank with you, one of my favorite wines to make has always been stylistically, I love making champagne, Méthode Champenoise. But a single varietal, one of my all-time favorites is Charbonneau. So can't go wrong with Cab, though.
Right. Next up on the Becker list, Charbonneau, right?
Right.
I do believe that it will be a few years, but yes, maybe. Yeah. So, Joe, are you there?
Yeah. If I could add a grape to what we do, I love Grenache Blanc. If we could do that in Texas, Drew or any of our growers are listening, we would love to be able to make a Grenache Blanc.
I'll have a case of the vapors.
What's that, Rachel?
Do we get to all throw out a recommendation of what we want to bring in next?
Yeah,
might as well. What?
Charbonneau and Joe gets Grenache Blanc. Can I throw out Carmenere?
Carmenere? Oh my God, really? You want to revive that one, huh?
And Bret gets Barbera.
Oh no.
I might not be on this Monday. I don't know.
No,
I think that
Bret really loves Syrah.
My ultimate favorite is Albarino. Let's do that again.
No. I like Albarino. I mean, you can't have Vino Verde without Albarino.
No, I'm just telling you from the standpoint of taking care of it in the vineyard and what we had to do with it at Mason and again.
Pain in the tuchus.
It's a very big deal. So, John, let's get to the food pairings because we're out of questions.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, okay, but we're going to start with Joe this time.
Okay. So I was thinking, my mother used to make an incredible kind of pork tenderloin cutlets with mashed potatoes, and kind of a darker currant sauce. And I was just thinking, if I had that right now in front of me, with this wine, that would be perfect.
Oh, that sounds really, really good. Okay, Brett, what would you pick?
Tenderloin.
Oh my God.
No, really?
We're no longer allowed to say that on this.
Yeah, right. We're gonna. Okay, we now know tenderloin goes with every varietal in the state of Texas. No. Okay, so Rachel, what would you pick?
All right, so I've been thinking about this because I really do try to prepare for this question almost every single day that we do this. And I don't know if this is more just a craving that I'm having, but since Joe brought up the other white meat, I'm going to defer back to a nice barbecue chicken.
Ooh.
Not
Really?
like barbecue, like a smoked grilled chicken.
Yeah. Well,
Rachel, if you're going to barbecue, I'm happy to come over and test this.
Well,
I didn't mean I was going to do. That's not what you want.
I will tell you what I'm going to have with this is mesquite grilled baby back ribs. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. All right, John. So I've got the ending and part of the agenda, I guess, here in front of me.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Go right ahead. Yeah.
All right. So next week it's pretty cool. We're doing the Father's Day pack up that we
Hell
did.
yeah.
And I think it's pretty special in the fact that Dr. Becker and Dr. Joe Becker let me go down into the cellar. I say all the Beckers let us go down into the cellar and pick up these cool wines that were down there. So we're doing 2015 Canada Cab on Monday, the 2014 Canada Cab on Wednesday, and then a 2012 on Friday, which was John's first year at the winery. So that should be very fun. And then the other thing we're going to throw in there is we're going to try to cook with some of the stuff that was in the non-wine pack, which was the rub that our chef prepared and put in that non-wine bundle that had the cap and
which is absolutely excellent, and it goes really well on those ribs. I'm just saying.
No, and I think I've said this before, but that goes well on lots of different things, especially a Bloody Mary in the morning on the rim of the glass because it's got coffee in it. That coffee, the ground coffee, just has some very cool notes that happen. But it's something that if you got that pack for next week, make sure to tune in, and hopefully we're going to keep doing this. And that's all I got.
And I would say with the wines that are coming up next week, anybody that's bought this, that's going to taste with us, should either decant Mrs. Canada's Cab for at least an hour beforehand, or at least uncork the wine way in advance, because just like Jet's wine, it's amazing what it does in the decanter or the bottle once it's opened.
Absolutely.
I also think that if you bought this vertical, it might be fun not to open the first one on Monday and not to open the second one on Wednesday and try all three of them on Friday night when we're talking about them and listening to the podcast, because I mean, we're trying not to ship you 3 wines a night that you have to open, but these are live on Facebook all the time. So you can go back. I mean, you can go back and watch our first one. But watching how the descriptions come along is something that I think that maybe most people don't know.
Well, what I'm going to do on that Friday broadcast, because we had talked about this before, I'm going to go through all 3 of them again. We'll do Monday and Wednesday, and then Friday we'll go through all 3 just as a recap. So if anybody wants to do that, we're happy to do it. And I'm looking forward to next week like nobody's business. This will be fun. So I also want to shout out to Trish and Gary, 2 of our followers. They've joined us every time. I always look forward to their comments. Sorry I couldn't see them tonight, guys. But Joe, any final words that you would like to give for this evening?
Just that Dad and I were talking this morning, not to be a Debbie Downer, but it sort of feels like things are getting worse again, and I hope that everybody is staying safe. We have continued to keep our tasting room closed, and I hope that these 30-minute tastings give people some levity, some break from everything that's going on, and hope that everything will come out for the better when we get through all this.
All right, I can cheers to that one. So Rachel, Bret, Joe, as always, it's always been fun. So y'all, everybody else, please, good wine and great health, and y'all have a safe weekend. Cheers.
And John and Rachel, incredible job. Cheers.
Thank you, sir.